Welcome to Creative in Tech, a podcast show powered by ReadSpeaker.AI. I'm your host, Carrie Roberts, and I'm the brand evangelist for North America at ReadSpeaker. This show is all about highlighting the various people, brands, and organizations that creatively use one of the fastest growing spaces in technology, artificial intelligence, including things like conversational AI, voice technology, and more. And today we have a very unique and special conversation. I am joined today with Susan Bennett. She is known as the voice of Siri, but she is also a professional speaker. She sings and does many other things. I'm so excited to have you, Susan. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, we are supposed to be having Kathleen O'Brien as well. She's having some technical difficulties, so if she's able to join us, we will add her in. Oh, looks like we may have her. We're going to wait one more second and see if she's in. Kathleen, we are live. Welcome, Hi. Kathleen. Welcome. So Kathleen O'Brien is here as well, and I will let her get set up.
Okay, honey, I'm on.
Okay. All right, so we are live, and yes, we're live. Welcome. Can you hear us? Yes. All right, so you just have to make sure you unmute yourself, Kathleen. So I want to start just from the very beginning with each of you, and Susan, I'm going to start with you first.
Okay.
I want to start a little bit about just your background individually as a whole. You know, like I said, you've been in singing, you've done in speaking. Where did you kind of begin, and how did you get into voice acting as a whole, Susan?
Well, it all started with music. I've been playing the piano since I was 4. I could play by ear. And so I took piano lessons for many years, and then I started singing in high school.
I can't hear.
Go ahead, you're good, Susan.
She's got her mic muted. So
yeah, she's fine.
Okay. So anyway, started singing in high school and continued in college doing musicals and started singing in a band. And then I got married right out of college and moved to Atlanta, Georgia. And I started doing the same thing there. And I also started singing in studios, backup vocals and jingles and things like that. And one day the voice actor didn't show up to read the copy for the jingle we had sung. And the studio owner said, "Susan, you don't have an accent. Come over here and read this copy." So I did, and I went, ding, 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 I can do this. So I got a coach and then got a talent agent. And so I've been doing that now for many years.
Well, who would have thought not having the accent would be an advantage and the ability to do jingles and different things? That's really exciting. Kathleen, can you hear us? I'm not sure if she can hear us. Okay, we'll continue and see if she can get it together. So Kathleen is also here. She was the voice of 411 directory assistants in the 80s and 90s. So if you used to call on your phone and you would ask questions, she was the voice of that as well. And so I wanted to bring these two ladies on to kind of talk about kind of these beginnings of where the voice kind of started, and especially in the technology that we use today. So Kathleen, are you there? Can you hear us? Not yet, okay. All right, so I want to go through, Susan, with you, how you kind of got into this role with Siri. You know, what is this story? How did it begin? Was it something that you were thinking about and actively pursuing, or did it just happen? Can you kind of tell us the story of how you got into it?
Yes, I don't really know how I got into it, except for the fact that I had read a lot of IVR scripts. Now, IVR is interactive voice response. And I had done that through a company here in Atlanta called GM Voices. And when I saw these new scripts, I thought, well, this is something really different, because they were, you know, because Siri was the first virtual assistant, basically the first public manifestation of AI. And so a lot of the, you know, everybody was kind of feeling our way along. And I didn't really know what I was recording for. I was told it was some kind of generic phone messaging thing. And so after doing all of these recordings, it ended up being about 5 months of recordings. And all of the scripts were created just for sound, because what they would do is a process called concatenation, where they would go in and extract sounds from the recordings and reform them into new phrases and sentences. And these are what ended up on our devices. So the scripts were really tough and tedious because it was very monotonous. Most of them did not make sense. And we would have to do a lot of repetitive things like say the schroding again, say the schrading again, say the schriding again, say the schreeding again, et cetera, et cetera. So it was very tedious and everything had to be read exactly the same so that they could just pick their sounds out and they would all be sort of, equal. So it was an interesting experience. And so 6 years after these recordings, suddenly I'm the voice of Siri, and it was a surprise. So I don't know who chose my voice. I don't know who chose my voice or when they did it. So yeah, it was a total surprise.
Did you find, when you were, when you found that out, when you were the voice of Siri, did you notice that? Were people coming up to you and saying, oh my gosh, you sound like the voice I have on my phone? Like, what was that experience like? Was there any type of maybe celebrity status that came with it at that time, especially when it was new?
No, not until I revealed myself. And there were only 2 people in the entire time that I was on the iPhone that recognized my voice. One guy was a waiter and the other was a guy who worked in a bank. And I said, you guys are in the wrong field. You've got really good ears. You need to get into audio somehow.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I want to do one more time, see if Kathleen, can you hear us?
Oh,
Still
dear.
I think I'm here, but I can't hear myself, and I can't hear Carrie, and I can't hear Susan, but hi.
All right.
We can hear you.
We can hear you. All right. So we will bring you back down. If you check your settings, Kathleen, you might be able to adjust the voice as well. So I'm going to come back to you, Susan. So as you kind of find out, okay, you become this voice of Siri, how did it change your life? Did it at all? Did it allow for more opportunities to come? Did it prevent opportunities? Were you approached any differently? What was kind of that maybe aftermath of kind of learning that, okay, now I'm this voice and you've continued to be that voice for a long time?
Well, it didn't, as I said, it didn't really have an effect except emotionally for the first couple of years. It took me a while to reveal myself because I was really afraid it was going to impact my voiceover career. I had been lucky enough to do all different kinds of voiceover work. And I was really afraid that if I identified myself as the voice of Siri, that I would be seriously typecast and stereotyped. And so that would, suddenly all I would be doing is like being a robot voice or the voice of, sounding like Siri. So it took me a long time to make that decision. My husband and son were just really adamant that I was being very silly, that I was missing out on a big opportunity. And basically what it meant something different for me. And so it turned out to be a really wonderful thing because this happened to me very late in my career. And so, any of you who have been working in this business for a long time, that, gradually you're replaced by other people and you don't get as much work as you used to. And so Siri basically gave me a whole new career. So I'm very happy with the fact that it happened. She allowed me to do something I never would have expected, which was to become a public speaker. And someone suggested, in fact, it was Steve Wozniak from Apple who suggested that. He's the only one that I ever talked to from Apple, and I met him at a tech conference, and I had to go up on stage and say some things about Siri. And he said, you're a natural on stage. He said, you really ought to do this. And so he's the one that encouraged me. So I went home and wrote a presentation, and then that's how it all started.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I know I've seen you before COVID, obviously. I've seen you on television, on different shows, kind of talking about your experience as well. I think you bring up an important point for creatives. I'm a dancer. And I understand, from an acting standpoint as well, you don't want to be typecasted per se. But when you said, okay, no, actually, this is me, that allowed for opportunities, but different opportunities. I think that's something important to talk about, from a creative standpoint, whether it's a voice actor or an actor, dancer, performer, any advice that you would have to them where they feel like, okay, I'm being put in a box, but maybe would allow them to kind of open themselves to other opportunities they haven't thought of.
Yeah, it's difficult when you've had a successful career doing, and I never did just add one thing. I had a band with my husband for almost 25 years. And so I've done a lot of different things, but I really, really loved voiceover work. I especially loved it back in the day when we used to all gather in the studio and work together. That was so much fun. Doing dialogue with other actors, it was a different experience. rather than just being isolated in our little booths the way we are now.
Yes.
But it's a difficult transition as you move into different stages in your life. If you've really loved what you were doing and suddenly, through no fault of your own, you're just not getting the same amount of work or the same type of work that you were getting before. And so you have to constantly keep testing yourself, I think, and keep trying different things until you latch onto something new that can really, take the place of whatever you were doing before.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I'm glad that you were able to kind of step forward and say, this is me, and allow yourself to kind of have this lucrative career. We're going to try one more time with Kathleen. Kathleen, can you hear us? Still not yet?
Yeah.
All right. Sorry, Kathleen. Hopefully we can have you on again. So Susan, I'm going to continue with you. So I want to talk about voice as a whole. We talk a lot on this show about voice technology and branding. What would you say from maybe a voice actor standpoint, what makes a great voice, and why does having a great voice matter to a brand?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I think it's kind of a hard thing to define, but it's you kind of know a great voice when you hear it. It's just, it has, I don't know, it has some depth. It has depth to it. Yeah, that's it's kind of a hard, it's like trying to define art. It's a really hard thing to pinpoint. It's kind of one of those things where you know it when you hear it. But the voice is a very important thing to people. And, for instance, now that we are sort of reduced to doing everything texting and everything's abbreviated and we're not really explaining ourselves completely. Email has even become sort of old school. Everything's being texted now. And I think we're losing a lot from that because, and the way that we can get around that is through the voice, because when something is in print, and especially if it's abbreviated, it's very difficult to get the feeling across. Because, if you say one line of, if you see a printed line of something and you don't have an emoji. That's where emojis came from, because emojis are replacing the voice. Because, you can have a line that was meant sarcastically or meant as a joke. And if you read it without that in mind, or without hearing the voice, creating that feeling for you, you could totally misunderstand what was being said. And so the voice is very important. And I think that as we move into more and more AI, and as the AI voices become more and more human, it's going to be important for people, as we keep getting replaced by machines, to at least keep that aspect of humanity.
Yes. And that kind of brings me to, like you said, kind of where we're at today. At ReadSpeaker.AI, we are a text-to-speech company. So we work with voice actors, and then we create kind of these AI voices. And, there's always this conversation with voice actors of, like you just said, am I being replaced? And I always think of it as like, it's more about scaling a voice. There are certain things where having a real human voice and doing something more creatively is important. And there are other areas where maybe a text-to-speech, like an IVR, other things could fit. And, when I think of voice technology, if there's something that's a conversational AI, I speak to like an IVR or like a Siri, right? I speak to a device, it does something in between, and then it speaks back to me. There's something about that qualitative feeling, as you just mentioned, that we sometimes see with emojis or in text, that is important, when we're having it speak back to us. It gives us a other experience. So I just am curious, on your thoughts, maybe you don't know that much about where the space is going at this point, but just from your experience and your thoughts overall, your feelings on kind of these synthetic voices, and what are some of the positives that you see, not only for voice actors, but maybe just in the technology space as well?
Unfortunately, I don't think it's that advantageous to the actors. There are many instances where, including my experience, that the voice, when it was recorded, it was intended for one thing and it turned out to be something else. And that's a very difficult thing for a voice actor. There's no way for me to measure the impact that Siri has had on my career. But what I can say is that, suddenly I was the voice of Siri. My voice became so ubiquitous And my voice is also on lots of GPSs. And so consequently, people know my voice. They may not know where they've heard it, but they know my voice. And so there's no way for me to measure the impact that's had on my career. So I think that, in the future, when people's voices are going to be used in that situation, the actor needs to be compensated, because up to this point, that has not happened. And so that's a tricky part. And as far as, you will listen to all of the virtual assistants that are out there now, and they're getting pretty close, but you'll still hear, I just don't know that they'll ever get the rhythm of the human voice. I'm not sure. They're getting pretty close, but you'll still hear Siri or Alexa say things like, I went there. It's like, I went there, or I went there, not I went there. You still got that little not quite right rhythm that lets you know that it is not a human being. So
yeah, I think, I think for the first piece you're talking about, I agree. Again, like I said, I'm a dancer, as a creative, as an artist myself. I agree. It's really important to make sure artists in any genre are compensated correctly. And it's something that, here at ReadSpeaker and a lot of other companies, hopefully are doing the same thing. We really make sure we have contracts in place. I always talk about creatives, make sure you have a lawyer, you have someone with you to make sure, like you said, where is my voice being used at the time that maybe you did stuff, unfortunately, that wasn't done. And so that you can see, okay, am I getting compensated? Can I scale my voice? So I think that's really important. And you're right. I think it's always coming back to when we think of AI as a whole and people say, oh, robots are taking over. I always kind of laugh because I'm like, I don't always think of it that way. I think, in terms of artificial intelligence, it can help us scale things. It can take away tasks that we don't want to do or that are repetitive, but it's not supposed to be fully human-like, right? And that's where I think there is that place for, like you said, having that kind of creative moment where maybe that long form content, that type of commercial, that specific thing. But sometimes for something maybe like an IVR, something that is a synthetic voice, like you had said, like a Siri, is something that can be beneficial to an organization. Would you agree?
Yes. Yeah, I think it definitely can. And, you want different things for, different voices are, appropriate for different types of products too. So there's a place for a lot of different sounds. Yeah, I think that it's just something that as we progress, we've seen such great change technologically in the last 20 years. That than we've ever seen before, I think, except for the Industrial Revolution, and it's, so this is just, it's kind of, I think we're in kind of a transitional period and an adjustment period of working with the machines. And, I think people are afraid they're going to be replaced by machines. But, that's just something we're going to have to deal with. We're going to have to figure out how to make that work so that we all, that we all still have a place on the planet.
Yes. Well, I think it is just about similar to what you mentioned earlier, adjusting yourself, being able to not feel typecasted like you would in a role, similar to a job, being able to really look at what are other avenues that I can be creative. Again, kind of going back to branding and voice. If somebody is looking for a voice actor, whether it's for, I want to do a commercial, I want to do something on television, I want to do a voiceover, I want to do a synthetic voice, like, how do they, if you have any suggestions, decide who is the right voice? Do you have any suggestions of how they can choose someone to represent their brand or what they should look for in choosing a voice that's there, similar to like they would do for a Sonic brand or, a design logo?
Well, a lot of it has to do with what the product is for. You're not going to do you're not going to have a person with a little high pitched, millennial voice selling Depends, I mean, a lot of it just makes sense, and, if you're selling a product that you need a nice, soft, comforting voice, rather than an edgy voice, a lot of it just makes sense to me,
I think it goes back to, like you said, kind of, who are you trying to reach? Maybe testing some things as well to see what the audience likes. I also think it's nice to have kind of options. As you've seen, right? Having been the voice of Siri, I know recently, there's been options to kind of change and have different voices, so people can choose if they want maybe a male or female, or they want something else. So we're seeing a lot more openness, and I think people forget, there's so many different voices, so many different people, right? Sometimes we think, oh, it's just a male or female voice, but every single person has a different cadence, a different presentation. And as a professional actor, I assume, you know how to adjust your voice to do different things.
Yes. Yeah, of course. That's part of the business. But there is a certain, inherent sound in each individual's voice. And, a lot of that just has to do with personal taste. It's like what music you like. It's very subjective. So a lot of it just depends on who's choosing the voice as to what they hear, what pleases them, or what they think their hopefully prospective customers will like. So yeah, it's all very subjective.
Yeah, I would agree. You're right. Some people might like one voice, some might not like the other. So maybe that's why it's good to test some options as well. So when you're thinking, again, you talked about, where you kind of started, you were the voice of Siri, you're kind of doing some public speaking. We're talking about the technology now. Where do you see kind of this technology going in terms of AI, conversational AI, synthetic voice, and voice acting? Do you have any thoughts of where you see it going, or maybe where you'd like to see it going in the future?
I really don't. I am not a techie person at all. And that's one of life's great ironies. If there is a wrong button to push, I will find it. But yeah, I'm not really sure, because to tell you the truth, that isn't the aspect of voice. That isn't the aspect of creativity or performance that interests me. I'm more interested in like the human condition, the human interaction, rather than, the AI thing. It's here to stay. And it's obviously something that people are going to invest in. It's something we're going to have to really deal with from an economic point of view when, they can create these, AI machines and robots that can do things and take the place of humans. We do have to consider that, and what the rest of us are going to do. Well, it's really, really hard to say. It's really hard to say.
Well, and it's, the technology changes so fast, especially we've seen in the last year and a half, again, across the board, of just having to adopt so much from being at home, as we talked about, online events, online things. How do we change all of that? So we are seeing that move quickly. But I think you're right. Just being able to be open, to adapt, to have conversations, to ask questions, and really make sure that any company that's doing technology is still thinking of the human piece, the human implications, and making sure that that is a piece of what's being created as well. Now, do you have any tips for voice actors today? Maybe one tip that you would give, especially now, again, we're working from home, things are different, things are changing. Any tips or advice you'd give for voice actors of today?
Well, I'm glad that I didn't start out now, because I'm basically an introvert. And I got a lot of my work originally through my agents. And nowadays, because so much of the work has gone non-union, and there's so much of the work is just done through the internet, that the onus is on the talent. So now the talent has to do everything. In the past, we used to just have to show up, and use our voices. But now we have to be we have to audition online. So we have to be the director, the performer, the editor, because they all want it perfect, the audition even. And so that's very, very different from the way it was in the past. So my advice is to learn as much as you can about your craft, not just the technological aspect, which of course is very important. You have to know how to have your own home studio. And it's very simple, and it's very inexpensive compared to, when I built my own from the ground up, I spent thousands of dollars. Now, if you have a smartphone, a mixer face, a microphone, a good microphone, and a closet, you've got a studio. So that's an advantage. the advantage and the disadvantage are both the same, which is the internet. And so you can get on and put your wares on the internet, but whether you get work from it, that's another thing. So the tip would be to find your niche, find where you can get some work. Agents are still important, especially in bigger cities and especially for bigger clients and for bigger projects. It definitely is advantageous to have an agent, but it's very easy to get started. And if you join these internet companies like Voice 123 and things like that, you get an opportunity to do a lot of auditioning, and that's important because auditioning is really tough. When in the past, when I used to go into audition to the agent's office, the agent would help you through it and explain, and sometimes the client would even be there. And so you would have that human contact. Now it's all just very cut and dried. I mean, you go into your studio, you do a couple of takes, you send it on, you email it and or upload it, and that's it. And you just wait to see if you hear from anybody. So it's a very different experience. And as I said, it's all up to the talent to do it all. So the better you can get at the technology, the better you get. You still have to have some skills in voiceover. You've got to be able to read well, because when you get into the actual session, many times if they're doing a 60-second commercial, many times they'll write 62 or 63 seconds worth of stuff, and you have to try to get it in there. So you need to be able to read well and articulate. As varied as you can be is your greatest asset. So you want to be as diverse as possible, and be able to think on your feet. I always advise people to do improv, because it's, if you can do improv, you can do anything. Because it just makes you have to just do it on the spot, and it's very helpful. It's scary. It can be scary, but it's very, very helpful. So anything that you can do to just be as versatile as you possibly can. Learn the technology, learn the voiceover skills, and then just throw yourself out there.
Would you say, because you're, saying be versatile, but then you also say kind of be niche, when you kind of brand yourself as a voice actor, because again, brands are looking for someone to fit their brand. Do you recommend that somebody describes themselves in a particular way, like, oh, happy Southern accent or something, or should they give like just samples? Like, how do you describe, or maybe tell a voice actor to be able to describe their brand so that brands can find them for what they need?
Well, when you put together your demos, we used to have everything on just one demo, but now they want a demo for everything. You've got a commercial demo, a narration demo, an animation demo, an e-learning demo. I mean, just on and on and on. And so, you want to have all of those things short, like 60 seconds. But basically, when you want to start off with your normal voice, how you just sound speaking on, just naturally. So it's kind of a little bit of both. You've got to put your own voice out there, but then show all the different things that you can do. So.
Well, and I think you even just saying, make sure you have a recording of your natural voice is important, because a lot of people want to start with that first and then kind of layer something from there. So I think that's good to have that. And then, like you said, the options. Well, I thank you so much, Susan. I am so sorry that Kathleen, unfortunately, wasn't able to get her sound working for us in time. But like I said, she was the voice of 411 and worked in media in her time as well, and now as an author and a speaker as well. But I thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights. If people want to connect with you, Susan, they have questions, maybe they want to learn from you, they want to hire you to speak, where is the best place they can do that?
The best thing to do is contact me through my website, which is susancbennett.com. And Bennett is 2 N's, 2 T's. I'm on social media, but I'm not very active, unfortunately. It's at Seriously Susan, SIRIOUSLY Susan, on Instagram and Twitter. And then I'm also on Facebook. Susan Bennett, voice of Siri. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited for you. I am so glad that you shared that this was your voice and you're able to be doing a lot of other things that has led you to different opportunities. And I thank you so much for being here and sharing your insight. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. And if you are watching and listening, if you want to see other video interviews we've done, you can check out our ReadSpeaker.AI YouTube page, as well as listen to our audio podcast, Creative and Tech, wherever you get your podcasts.